Good morning, everybody. Another beautiful morning. We're so lucky. I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker, Mayor Bliss, this morning. I'm sure most everybody has heard her before, has heard about her, good, bad, the ugly. That comes. But I have some facts for us this morning. Mayor Bliss became the Grand Rapids first female mayor when she took office in January of 2016. And then she was reelected for a second term in November of 2019. And before that, she served as a second ward city commissioner for 10 years. So I think she knows the city pretty well. Mayor Bliss earned a bachelor's degrees in psychology and criminal justice from the University of South Alabama, and then a master's in social work at Michigan State University. She also is serving as the Frederick Meyer Endowed Chair in Entrepreneurship and Innovation in GVSU's Frederick Myers Honors College, where she teaches a junior seminar. Major Bliss is an active member of the community, very active member, I should say. She is past president of the Michigan Municipal League and currently serves on the boards of the Downtown Development Authority, Experience Grand Rapids, Convention Arena Authority, Grand Rapids Promise Zone Authority, Housing Kent, Urban Core Mayors, Art Prize 2.0, City Business Collaborative, the Economic Club of Grand Rapids, and I'm sure this isn't the only other one, the Interurban Transit Partnership. Mayor Bliss has been recognized and honored locally as well as statewide for her commitment, dedication, and work in the field of child abuse and neglect, and for her leadership in the community. Some of her recognitions are Michigan Women Forward's Woman of Achievement and Courage Award, National Forum for Black Public Administrators Leadership Excellence Award, U.S. Conference of Mayors Small Business Advocate Award, Dispute Resolution Center of West Michigan Peacemaker Award, Crane's 100 Most Influential Women, Grand Rapids Business Journal's 50 Most Influential Women in West Michigan, and a 5-time recipient of Grand Rapids Business Journal's 40 Under 40 distinction. I'm not done with the awards. I'm sorry. The Tim Pope Memorial Award for Outstanding Young Governmental Leader, Christine Nelson Professional Award for Service to Children, the Michigan Professional Society on Abuse of Children's Special Recognition Award. Now, Mayor Bliss is also involved in the National Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative. She works to connect children to the benefits of nature more often. Now, some fun facts about Mayor Bliss.
Oh, not prepared for that.
Well, they're not hard. They're okay. She grew up in a family with 10 children. She performed in children's musicals while in college, including Peter Pan and Peter and the Wolf. She wanted to be a meteorologist until she took a calculus class in college and then decided to be a social worker. She loves the outdoors. Camping, hiking, kayaking. Her favorite place is the Two-Hearted River in the UP, and she wants to kayak the entire length of the Grand River. Now, as mayor, Rosalynn Bliss is committed to supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs, working to create a cleaner, healthier, and safer community, and has a commitment to addressing the disparities in our community to make sure that Grand Rapids is a great place for everyone. So let's give a warm Grand Forum welcome to Mayor Bliss.
Thanks. I can't believe you found some of those fun facts about me. I'm really delighted to be joining you all today. I think it's been at least 4 or 5 years since I've been with you, so it's good to be back with this great group of folks. Thank you for that nice introduction. I assure you I'm not under 40 anymore, so it's been a while since I got that award. But I'm really delighted to join you today and to talk about some of the great things happening in the city. I'll add a few things about my journey into leadership. I am from a family of 10. Often people ask if I grew up in Grand Rapids. If you're wondering that, the answer is no. I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula, which probably impacted my love for nature because I was surrounded by it growing up, and that's where I found my sense of grounding in this crazy world. And so I still have family in the UP, but I am one of 10. And interesting about that is that we're all just a year apart. So my mom had 10 kids in 10 years. I know, she's crazy. She's still a little crazy. But we literally all grew up together and are still very close, and we're all scattered about Michigan. If you're a birth order person, often people ask me, what number am I? So if you're wondering, I am number 7. I think once you get to 10, birth order theories go out the window, quite frankly, except my oldest sister, Renee, she's still the mother hen and is more like a mom to us than a sister. And so I'm sandwiched in between my brothers. So I have 6 little brothers and 6 older brothers, and then I'm the youngest girl. And when I was first elected to office, so this was back in 2005, when I was elected as a city commissioner, I would sometimes joke with Mayor Hartwell at the time when we would be commiserating about some of the craziness that doesn't seem all that crazy now, but the craziness back then. And I would joke with him that I was prepared to serve on the commission with 6 men because I grew up with 6 brothers. And so we would often joke about that. But I do think growing up in a big family really has helped me develop a lot of the skills that I use today, especially that peacemaker, which tends to be my go-to when I'm in a large group and there's contention or conflict. So anyway, that's not what you're here to hear about, my story. I want to tell you about the story of our incredible city and update you on some of the things happening, some of the things I've been working on, and then answer questions. I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions today. I find that that's the most interesting part of getting out in the community and having conversations about our city is really hearing your questions and answering what you're worried about, concerned about, thinking about, curious about. So today what I'd like to do is just hit on some high-level things that we're working on at the city around these primary issues. Around public safety, clearly public safety is an issue that not just our city, but cities all over the country are wrestling with. How do we make sure that we stay a safe city? It's really fundamental to be in a great city. If people don't feel safe here, they're not going to want to stay here and live here and have a business and grow their business and raise their children. Housing, a lot going on in housing. Grand Rapids is the fastest growing part of our state. We have a serious housing shortage. A recent housing assessment shared that we are just in the city of Grand Rapids. We need about 14,000 housing units by 2027 just to meet current demand. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the work we're doing around economic development. A lot of great work happening that we're involved with, but also within our neighborhoods. So we're really being intentional about supporting locally owned businesses, and then I'll talk about some of our efforts around sustainability, and I'll end with some of the big projects that I'm working on that take up a lot of time and hopefully will change the trajectory of especially our downtown, or at least the feel of downtown. So ultimately, this is our goal. This is my hope as mayor to continue to work hard to move our city forward in a positive way to make sure that Grand Rapids is a great place for everyone and that people who live here have a bright future. We just had a report come out yesterday saying that Grand Rapids continues to be in the top 150 cities in the country as the best place to live. We were number 20 on the list. Ann Arbor still got ahead of us. So I'm going to have to call Mayor Taylor over there and nudge him a little bit. But anyway, this is ultimately what we want, right? We want to be a great city, and we want to be a place where our children and our grandchildren want to come and live and stay and live their lives. So a couple things I want to start on is our Grand Rapids Police Department. So public safety has turned out to be one of the issues since serving on the commission has been a primary issue that we have worked on. A lot of changes have happened over the years. We all know that over the last several years, especially with the tragic murder of George Floyd, and deaths throughout our country, especially. Then the officer-involved shooting here in Grand Rapids last year with Patrick Leoya, that public safety and how do we police our communities differently has been a primary topic of conversation. And so fortunately, we have an incredible police chief, Chief Winstrom. Have any of you met him? No, he's fabulous. You should add him to your list. He's been with us for just over a year and has really taken the lead on thinking differently about policing in our community. So Chief Payne before him worked with community to create a new strategic plan, really focused on neighborhood policing. Chief Winstrom has carried that forward and is looking at how do we implement, how do we make sure that we're measuring outcomes. And under his tenure over the last year, we've implemented a number of really important efforts, both internally to try to really shift the training more towards de-escalation and working with community, building relationships, getting out of our cars, out of our police cars, which unfortunately during COVID, a lot of the work that we had been doing in policing was set back tremendously. So at the city, similar to other communities as well as businesses, because of safety, we really stopped doing proactive policing. We wanted our officers to stay in their cars, have as minimal contact with others, right? We had a couple officers actually get COVID, got very, very sick. Same thing with our fire department. So similar to other services, a lot of our services at the city during COVID, we pulled back. We stopped going into people's homes and doing fire prevention. We really pulled back on some of those interactions where we were within 6 feet of somebody or in small groups. And then, as we all know, a lot of people weren't meeting. Everything was on Zoom. I think that had a really negative impact on relationships that we have with people. It's hard to build meaningful relationships over a screen. That's just, unfortunately, how the world works, right? Human nature is you connect with people, you get to know them, you share personal experiences with them, you lose the nonverbals. So I really think that COVID was detrimental to some of the work we had been doing around community and police relations. And then we had significant civil unrest. And so we had to take a real close look at what we were doing around public safety and then double down our efforts to build relationships. Coupled with that, we wanted to focus on, and here's some pictures, we wanted to focus on how do we really think differently about supporting individuals. So a couple things that we've done in the police department. This is actually an image of the homeless outreach team that we started. So during COVID, we had a significant increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness. And similar to cities and companies, nonprofits were also pulling back. And so some of the work that had been being done in community around outreach was being pulled back by our nonprofits. We were getting a lot of calls, people concerned about the safety of individuals experiencing homelessness. So a couple years ago, we created the homeless outreach team, which included a team from our police department, fire department, coupled with mental health professionals from Network 180 at the county. They get together every single day. They get out in the community. They get to know people who are unsheltered and try to connect them with services. So here's some of the work that we're doing. We've had some success. I'll tell you, there's other challenges. But that's one of the aspects of what we did to help our police department just connect more proactively with people who are vulnerable. The other thing that we did about a year ago is we secured some grant funding and then took some of our federal dollars, partnered with the Urban League to implement Cure Violence. So Cure Violence is an evidence-based violence prevention program. It's actually a program that I've known about for about 5 years. So as you said, my background is in social work. I've worked with youth and in the field of domestic violence and child welfare for a long time. Actually, up until I became mayor, I was the director at St. John's Home. Before that, I was the director at Kids First Emergency Shelter. Before that, I was at the Children's Assessment Center and DeVos Children's Hospital Child Protection Team. So I've worked with a lot of young people in our community who are very vulnerable, who have committed serious crimes, some of them currently in jail or prison. And so I knew firsthand that it's really easy for a young person to get involved in a situation where they don't know what to do, make a decision that changes the trajectory of their life. So I've known about Cure Violence. I'm a big believer in evidence-based practices. This is one of the best evidence-based violence interruption practices in the country. It's been done in other cities. and has shown really positive results. So it's been on my list of priorities for a long time. Finally, last year, we were able to get the funds to initiate this program. So far, it has touched thousands of young people's lives. The essence of it is that you hire people, train people to be violence interrupters that have lived experience and they have deep relationships in the communities where we have the highest incidence of violent crime. And then you couple that with services and supports, and you try to interrupt violence before it happens. So I'm really glad to have this off the ground. We're working with the National Cure Violence organization and also some researchers to actually measure the impact of this effort. Currently, it's a three-year pilot. And then after that, my hope is that it becomes a permanent part of the work that we do in partnership with the Urban League. And our police department is involved as well. But mostly it's led by the Urban League. So here's the director with our chief, Chief Windstrom. We're doing a lot of community engagement. Our police department is out and about every single day connecting with community. That is coupled with our Office of Public Oversight and Accountability Office. So about 2 years ago, the City Commission created an Office of Public Oversight and Accountability to really address some of the concerns we were hearing from the community around transparency and accountability and oversight in public safety in general. So we hired Brandon Davis to lead that department. And Brandon Davis's department has taken on a number of efforts. One, they lead our Civilian Appeals Board. So whenever somebody has a complaint about our department, there's an internal investigation. And then if there's an appeal, it goes before a citizen body called the Civilian Appeals Board. Brandon is the liaison for that group. Under his leadership, we've also started programs that we're doing throughout the community around Know Your Rights, trying to educate young people, especially about what their rights are, what they should do if they get pulled over by a police officer. Also, he has been leading the charge on organizing expungement fairs. So we call them Clean Slate. It's our Clean Slate program. So about a year and a half ago, there was some state legislation that was passed that allowed for more people who had a criminal record to go through a process to have that record expunged. And we all know that if you have a criminal record, it can impact a lot of aspects of your life, right? It can impact your ability to get a job, to get an apartment, to go maybe to a school activity. So we know it has a huge impact on people's lives. And once they've served their time and and they haven't committed another crime for years, they really should have a second chance. And so that's what the Clean Slate program is. So we've been implementing this program for about 8 months. And again, it's in partnership with our city attorney's office, our Office of Public Oversight and Accountability, and then our police department is very, very supportive of the OPA's efforts in this work. A few other things that we're doing in the police department is that we are actively working with community around youth programming. So we have the police chief, under his leadership, we have a Youth Explorers program where young people can come and learn what it's like through like an internship program. We have a college internship program with young people in the police department. We also partner with the Boys and Girls Club, and we fund a portion of their programs both at the Paul I. Phillips and the Style Center. We have Camp O'Malley out on the Thornapple River where young people can go during the summer and connect with police officers. And then we work with our neighborhood associations. We give out several hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to our neighborhood associations to do crime prevention and to work with our police department. And then it's a lot of just building relationships. And that is what the chief and especially his leadership team is really committed to do. I've said this before, and if you hear me talk about public safety, I just yesterday was on a panel with Dr. Roby talking about school safety. The reality is that having a safe community is the responsibility of all of us. We can't just point the finger at our police department and say it's your job to make sure that our community is safe. We really need everybody stepping up. We need people reporting things when they see things. When a crime happens, we need people to share the information that they have. We need people to build relationships. We know relationships are really key to create stronger social cohesion in neighborhoods, which ultimately makes them safer. And so we all have a role to play in that. The other thing I'll say about safety is we just hired a new fire chief, Brad Brown. So if you don't know Brad, he's fantastic. He's been with the department for over 20 years. He has led a lot of our strategic planning initiatives. But one thing that we have reinstituted that we started before COVID, but hit the pause button with COVID, and now we're starting it back up again, is that we have a fire prevention program where a team from our fire department will go into homes. They'll assess all of the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. And if you don't have an adequate number in your home, they will actually put them in for free. So we have installed, I should say, over 70,000 smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in the last 6 years. It's really remarkable. And I remember the first time I got a call from our former police chief, Chief Lehman, about a fire, and it was a home that we had been in and put smoke detectors in. And we really believe that saved that family's life. So a lot of good work is happening both in our fire department and our police department to try to ensure that people are safe in their homes and in our communities. So let's talk about housing. I spent a lot of my time lately on housing. I actually have for years. There's a whole spectrum of needs around housing. Our city is growing. Many of you know that. If you look at your property value and what you could sell your home for, you probably have noticed that it's gone up tremendously. We are one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. A lot of people are moving here, which is fantastic. We want to be a growing city. Currently, the average age of a person who lives in our city is actually 31.5, younger than me. I'm 47, if you're wondering. It's tremendous. And that's a good thing. We're attracting talent. Young people who graduate from Grand Valley are deciding that they love the city and they want to stay here. Companies are moving here. I just did 2 business visits last week. But with that comes challenges. And the big one that we're finding is housing. And we are in need of housing across the entire spectrum. We need market rate housing. We need affordable housing for people who can't afford market rate. We need low-income housing. We need transitional housing for people who need transitional housing. We need permanent supportive housing for people who are vulnerable, who cannot live in a setting without supports in place. And we need it across the board, and we need more of it, and we need it really, really quickly. So I told you about the housing needs assessment. We know it's a significant need, and now we're trying to figure out what do we need to do to get there. We also know that we have a number of people in our community who are living unsheltered, who are homeless and are experiencing homelessness, and we need to do better as an entire community and system to better meet their needs and get them rapidly rehoused and in safe housing as quickly as possible. No one should be living out on the street. No one should be unsafe outside, especially in the elements in our winter time, or there's a whole host of reasons why we don't want people living outside. It's not safe for them. So let's talk about some of our efforts. I love this picture because I love the trees. Sometimes you don't get to see the trees until you go way up, and I have lots of goals around tree canopy. But anyway, I'll talk about that towards the end. So in my State of the City that I did just about 6 weeks ago, I talked about trying to put into a visual of how, so when I say 14,000 housing units is what the need is, how do we conceptualize that? So if you look at a traditional neighborhood, so our city has a lot of great traditional neighborhoods. I live in one of them. I live in Fulton Heights. So where you have single family homes, my neighborhood was built in the 1950s. So if you think about 14,000 housing units in a neighborhood like mine, it would be roughly 580 blocks of housing. So that kind of gives you a concept of how much housing we need. And so if you look at the county, that need is even greater. And so one thing that I've been working really hard at, both at the state level and locally, is how do we make sure we have the right housing in the right place? And if we're going to meet that need, we really need to build density. We need to go higher up. We need more densely populated areas. And there's certain parts of our city where that makes sense. So downtown, I've been saying this since I was mayor, since I became mayor, is I need my developers to go higher, taller. We need taller buildings. We need greater density downtown. Right now we have about 6,700 people living downtown. Our goal is 10,000. We're not going to get there unless we go up. Some of our near neighborhoods can also absorb higher density. We have a lot of underutilized buildings. There's a building over on North Monroe. A developer is talking about turning that into 562 housing units. That's wonderful. There's another project over off of Godfrey, Factory Yards, that will create another 500 units. We need to start to support those large-scale developments if we're going to reach that tipping point of housing that we need. We also need to make sure that we're building mixed-income housing. We need low-income housing, affordable housing, and market rate. We need all three. We need to have lots of different housing options that meet the different needs of people. Some people want to live in a small apartment. I personally love living in a small single-family home. If I was a family of 10, which I don't have children of my own, but if I did, I may want a bigger house. And I want to make sure that regardless of where you are, whether you want a small place to live or a single-family home or you need a 5-bedroom home, there's a place for you in our city that you'd be able to find that housing. The other opportunity that we have in our neighborhoods, so here's some examples of higher density and projects that are coming online. We have a number of projects that are in the pipeline or will be started in construction this year. If you've driven down Plainfield, there's 2 major developments that are being built over there. You're starting to see some development both on the west side and the east side. There's 2 potential significant developments downtown that could add a couple thousand housing units. And so there's a lot of development happening. There's also an opportunity for infill housing and then to think more creatively. So this is a project called Hope Village. Many of you have probably heard about tiny houses. And so Mel Trotter Mission, they are talking about building 18 single-family little homes. They'll be specific to serving people who work at Next Step. So many of you may know that Mel Trotter and Next Step, 2 nonprofits, merged together. So they have a workforce development program. And they would be building these little homes for people that are already in their workforce development home. So it's a concept that we don't have here in our city. It's something that we're willing to try and support to see if it fills the need, or at least one of the needs, for individuals who are most vulnerable and can utilize a space like this. So there's a lot of good work happening. Couple other things happening around housing is that we at the city, we're also looking at our zoning code, and we're looking at what we can do to incent people to build accessory dwelling units for 2 reasons. One, it can create a secondary income, but also it can create an affordable place. So these are the units that would go above someone's garage. So we changed the zoning code a couple years ago to allow it, but I think we made it a little too restrictive because we haven't seen the number that we thought we would see. So we're likely going to open that back up and make some changes. We also are looking at vacant lots in the city. Some of our vacant lots under our former code, they were too small to build on. They were considered non-buildable lots. We have hundreds of them in the city, actually. So we're looking at what we can do to make those lots buildable and do smaller scale infill housing on some of those smaller lots. We've also looked at what we can do on corner lots. Corner lots are a great place to build a multi-unit, a 2 or 4-plex. We don't have a lot of duplexes in our city, and historically there's probably lots of reasons for that. So we have some corner lots that are really ripe for redevelopment, and they can easily do that smaller infill. You've seen some of this right here on Fulton, where you've seen some of the corners redeveloped. So again, how do we look at policy and start to support some of that housing that we know is needed in the community? And then we're looking at some state law changes. So I'll be in Lansing again next week. I was there last week trying to figure out how we can potentially use brownfield TIF, which is a tax increment form of capture to support affordable housing to pay for that cost differential. Because right now with the skyrocketing costs of construction, new builds, you just can't make the numbers work and make those homes affordable. One of our priorities is how do we figure out affordable home ownership. We know that wealth generation is closely tied to home ownership. And so we need to do a better job of creating those opportunities for people. So let's talk about economic development just a little bit. As I said, lots happening in our city. We've been able to attract some great large companies to our city, but an area that I'm really passionate about is supporting our small locally owned businesses and supporting them not just in areas of our city where we don't have a lot of diversity, but really throughout our city. So I believe that our city is a special place because we have all these unique neighborhoods. We have all these amazing neighborhood business districts. They all have their own flavor and their own energy and their own culture. And how do we continue to support that? So at the city, in our economic development department, we've been very strategic to support locally owned businesses, minority and women-owned businesses. We have changed some policies internally for locally owned businesses that if you're in Grand Rapids and you are a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business, you can get up to a 9% bid discount on projects that we bid out at the city. but then also we have a number of grant programs that we support small businesses with. And then every single one of our neighborhoods have a corridor improvement district. So when I first became mayor, we only had one corridor improvement district. I actually served on that board. It was in Uptown. And it's similar to the Downtown Development Authority, just on a smaller scale. So that Uptown, which is basically East Town, Cherry Street, they are able to capture a portion of their local taxes, and then the board decides how that money is reinvested in that neighborhood business district. So in Uptown, they've invested in things like new trash cans and flowers and a cleaning crew that comes in and clean, and they can use the money for marketing. So Uptown's been around for about 10 years. When I became mayor, one of my goals was to create more of these smaller neighborhood business corridor improvement districts. We now have 7. So the West Side has one, and Granville has one, and South Division, and Southtown, and North Quarter, and Michigan Street. And so they're just these small districts. The people who serve on those boards are people who own businesses or live in those districts. They're able to capture a small portion of the income or of the property tax that people pay, and then they can reinvest that in that business district. It's a great model to give people on the ground in that space the resources they need to invest in those neighborhoods, and we've seen incredible success. So you've probably noticed that a lot of our business districts, they have really accelerated their growth over the last several years. They can use that money for facade improvements, they can use it for infrastructure improvements, they can use it for lighting, they can use it for trees, they can use it for a lot of things to improve those neighborhoods, and it's been really, really successful. And then, as I said, we've attracted other large companies. A lot of the larger companies that have come to our city, there's a ton of work that happens behind the scenes. Typically, Grand Rapids is competing with other cities with some of these large companies. And very often, I'd say like right around, the 7th or 8th inning, I'll get a call when we're in the running, the city of Grand Rapids is in the running, and I'll go and meet with the company, and I'll try to make the case why they should come to Grand Rapids instead of Cincinnati or Columbus or Indianapolis or Chicago, or sometimes they want to go to Florida. And anyway, we've been very successful at being able to attract companies here, and then it requires us working with the state of Michigan, because typically the Michigan Economic Development Corporation is supporting that business to move to Michigan in some way. So then our team works with the state to attract that company here. So let me talk about some of our sustainability efforts. So let me back up here. So sustainability, how many of you knew Mayor Hartwell or know Mayor Hartwell? Okay, I loved serving with him. And he and I shared a number of priorities and commitments around environmental sustainability. And unfortunately, when Mayor Hartwell was mayor, there were a few things that were really hard to get over the finish line for a whole host of reasons. And so one of my priorities when I became mayor is I said to Mayor Hartwell, I'm going to work really hard to get solar on Butterworth, to get to 100% renewable energy for city services, to get LED street lights, to improve our primary circuit. So I had this list, and I told Mayor Hartwell, I'm going to continue to try to work to get these things over the finish line. So one of the first things we were able to do, we started this effort about 6 years ago. It's about a $14 million cost, but we are converting all of our street lights over to LED lights. So in the city of Grand Rapids, we have 18,500 and roughly 20 street lights. And we are converting all of them over to LED, which is going to save us a ton of energy. They're much more energy efficient. But the cool thing is that they're also smart. So one thing I did when I became mayor is I started to look at policies where we had what I call disparate impact. So the city of Grand Rapids, a lot of our policies are complaint-based policies. And so if you're unhappy with your neighbor's lawn, you call me and we'll go out and we'll make sure they mow their lawn. But you have to call us and let us know. If you have a street light out, you have to call the city and let us know they have a street light out. If your tree is dead in the right-of-way, you got to call the city and let us know the tree is dead. If your sidewalk is cracked or broken or there's a big lip on it that's dangerous, you used to have to call the city and let us know. So when I first became mayor, I looked at a lot of data, and I started to disaggregate the data based on different parts of our city, different neighborhoods, different census tracts, and also by race, some of the things by race like lead poisoning, air quality, things like that. And what we found is that the complaint-based system works really well in neighborhoods like mine, which tends to be more affluent. It doesn't work all that well in poor neighborhoods for a number of reasons, right? If I'm focused on putting food on my table, getting to work, my car just broke down, I have additional stress in my life, the last thing I'm going to do is figure out how to call the city about a tree or a street light or a sidewalk. So what we found is that we had a lot of our poorer neighborhoods who had really significant issues with their infrastructure, with city-owned infrastructure. And so one of the things that that we've worked at the city is to remove that and make sure that we are proactively going throughout the city and fixing city assets. And then also we're not relying on the community to complain about something for us to know about it to fix it. Now you can still complain and we will fix it. So you got to do both, but it shouldn't be the only way something comes to our attention that needs to be fixed. So we have now over 8 sidewalk contractors. They're assigned to a certain area of the city, and they go every single year, and they go and proactively identify what sidewalks need to be replaced. No one has to call to do that. Same thing with trees. We increased our urban canopy, our urban forestry budget, and we go out and we identify priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 trees, which ones need to be trimmed, which ones need to be treated. We do that throughout the whole city. We also contract with some great tree services and a nonprofit in town called Friends of Grand Rapids Parks to do that. With street lights, these are smart lights. So our department is notified when the light goes out. Nobody has to call. We can also dim them. So if you have a LED light in front of your house and you think it's way too bright, let us know. We can actually dim it. With that being said, we're not going to dim it too much because we also know that lighting is closely tied to safety. So we actually have a whole formula where we know we need a certain amount of light on streets to make them safer for people, both from a trip to making sure that crime doesn't happen. Lighting is key to crime prevention. So this I'm really proud of. We are in the process of finishing up this project this year, and we will have all of our LED lights across the whole city replaced, and it's going to be great. Another big project I've worked on over the last several years that just came online last week, I'm so excited about it, you may have read about it, is our anaerobic or biodigester. So we embarked on a process at our wastewater treatment facility, so that's where we take all the waste from your house and from businesses, and we treat it and clean it before it's pumped back out into the Grand River. We were in a position a couple years ago recognizing we either need to expand our wastewater treatment facility to the tune of about $140 million, or we need to do something different with our waste. And coincidentally, it was right at the same time that Founders Brewery was growing, and they wanted to stay in the city and manufacture in the city. They produce a lot of waste product. Interestingly enough, it's a very rich waste product. So meaning it's really good waste. And so we met with them, and at the time, before the biodigester, they were going to have to pre-treat their waste because of the quality of the waste, and it was going to tack on a couple $1 million to their bottom line. So they said, look, if we were out in a greenfield, we would not have to do this. We want to stay in the city, but you got to work with us. We can't have this additional cost. So we started working with them and a number of other food manufacturers in the city, and we actually built a pipe from Founders to our wastewater treatment facility, which gives us the ability to control the flow. I'll try not to get too far in the weeds. I find this absolutely fascinating, though. So we're taking waste from Founders, we're taking waste from other manufacturers, running it through our anaerobic digester, which is about an $80 million project, and then we are creating renewable natural gas. And that renewable natural gas is being sold to DTE, and DTE is then selling it. Actually, it's a partnership with DTE because they're getting federal tax credits for this process because they're creating clean energy. But then we're taking that renewable natural gas and we're using it in our dash buses. So our dash buses over the years, we've bought compressed natural gas buses, which is cleaner. And so now, as of the last 7 days, we're taking energy that was created from waste in our city and using it to power our rapid buses. Complete circle, right? It's a circle of life. I know. It's been a very, very exciting project. As you can imagine, we ran into a few hiccups along the way when there was a bunch of federal bickering about steel, which increased our steel costs unbelievably. And then COVID hit and construction was put on hold. So we've had a few hiccups. It should have been online about a year ago, quite frankly, but I'm glad it's done. The great thing is that we built it to a size where we have capacity, where we have more capacity to add. So it's just a really incredible project, and I'm proud of the work that we did there. It's a national model, quite frankly. And people usually ask me, does it smell? First off, it's at the wastewater treatment facility. The facility already smells if you've been there. But secondly, it doesn't smell. It doesn't give up. We actually worked with Eagle really closely and EPA. But lots of people still have the memory of the biodigester in Lowell. This is totally different. This isn't farm waste. This is food waste from manufacturing companies. So anyway, that's a wonderful environmental sustainability story. Here's another one. This is a new solar array out at our Lake Michigan filtration plant. So our Lake Michigan filtration plant and our wastewater treatment facility are our two highest energy users in the city of Grand Rapids. So if you look at all of our facilities, City Hall, police station, fire stations, the two buildings that and departments that use the most energy is wastewater treatment facility and Lake Michigan filtration plant. Lake Michigan filtration plant is where we bring in the water from Lake Michigan, we clean it, we run it through the pipes, and when you open up your faucet, that's the water that comes out. So I was really excited last summer. This took a lot of work because we're in a very regulated state, so we have to work with consumers and DTE. But we were able to get this over the finish line. This is a solar array that we added out at Lake Michigan filtration plant, which is a behind the meter solar array, meaning that we use the energy generated to power our Lake Michigan filtration plant, which gets us a little bit closer to that 100% renewable energy. So this is a really exciting project, and I was so happy when that opened up. A couple other things that we're doing, and I should tell you this year we'll meet our 100% renewable energy goal because we're buying RECs. So we're buying green energy from Consumers Energy. So we're spending about $300,000 more to do that, but hopefully it'll continue to incent consumers and DTE to continue to invest in renewable energy sources. I still want to get solar at Butterworth Landfill. We just are in the process of putting out an RFP for that, so hopefully we'll get a great proposal. It's an incredible opportunity to add probably about 200 acres of solar on that location. It's just tricky because it's a Superfund site and there's a cap and you have to work with EPA and all of that fun stuff. So a couple other big projects for me that I care deeply about and I want to get over the finish line before I'm done being mayor. This is Martin Luther King Park. So we have all of these incredible parks in our city. Parks have been near and dear to my heart since I got elected. One of my goals is that there's a park within safe walking distance of every child that lives in the city. And then also, how do we invest in our parks that are in our poorest neighborhoods? So one thing that I've heard from residents that live in the Martin Luther King Park neighborhood for years is that they want a new lodge. So we've been working with community, and we plan to build a brand new 2-story lodge at Martin Luther King Park. It's about an $18 million project. We'll use some, I'm in the process of hopefully securing some state funds to offset the cost, and then we'll use some of our federal funds. So Martin Luther King Park is one of my top priorities. Plaza Roosevelt, which is a new park on Granville or Cesar Chavez. We want to develop that park hopefully yet this year. And then a new lodge at Roosevelt Park neighborhood. So that lodge also really needs to be replaced and that community deserves it as well. So those are some exciting projects. Another big project and priority of mine is to redevelop our river and riverfront, and most importantly, connect our trails. So we have this incredible trail system in Michigan. we're getting there in Kent County. Ottawa County has done exceptional work in creating an incredible trail system. We obviously have the trail that goes all the way to Cadillac. We have the Oxford Trail that goes out towards the west, out to Lake Michigan. Most of the disconnection points on that trail system are in the city of Grand Rapids. And those places that we don't have trail connectivity, it's largely because it's the most expensive. So one of them is if you're going down Canal, Leonard to Ann, there's a break. So you can't get from Canal Park to Riverside Park. That's about a $9 million project. And the reason it's so expensive is because you have to go and kind of cantilever over the water underneath the bypasses, underneath the highway. So at Leonard and Ann, we have to go underneath and create a walkway. It's very expensive. We need an Eagle permit. We need a FEMA permit. We need a CLOMAR. It's just more complicated. But we're really committed to getting that done. The other one is some disconnection points actually from Fulton to Market, crossing over here on the west side to Wealthy over to the Oxford Trail. So last year, I can't believe it was just a year ago, I worked really closely with some of my partners at the state and some folks in Detroit, and we were able to get a $55 million earmark to support the construction of trails in our city. It's state ARPA funds, so they have to be used. They have to be allocated by the end of 2024 and expended by 2026. So having that $55 million is going to accelerate all of our work to connect our trails throughout Kent County. So it's super exciting. We also are working with the county to connect the trails from downtown, kind of going through like Grand Rapids Township over to Ada, all the way out to Lowell. So we're really excited about that. In fact, 19 million of the 55 million will go to the county to work on that portion of the trail. Ultimately, we want to be able to get on our bike in the heart of the city, go all the way to Cadillac if we want, go all the way to Lake Michigan if we want, or all the way out to Lowell, or all the way to Muskegon or Holland. So our hope is that we have this really integrated, connected trail system, and we know that will attract not just tourism, but also potentially some sporting events. So Mike Gusweiler at West Michigan Sports Commission keeps telling me this is a priority. And I believe it is because it's good for all of us, right? We need non-motorized safe trails for people to walk and bike on. So that's really exciting. A couple other big projects, and then I'll take questions. There's a number of big projects that we're doing along the river's edge as well. Lion Square is one of them. So this is the space in between Amway and the Convention Center. We just got, about 4 weeks ago, we just got the permits from the state to move forward on that. We'll completely redevelop that space, and we will create a better walkway down to the river and make it much, much safer. We're also going to make that space an event space. So when the Convention Arena Authority has events and conventions here and they want to have an outside space to do receptions, they'll be able to do that in this space as well. It'll include lighting, trees. Here's a little bit of a image of it over here. Some of the design aspects have changed, but it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and we should be in construction probably within the next 2 months for that. Many of you are probably familiar. Oh, here's a better image of it. So here's an image of Lion Square right here. And the top one up there is Lion Square as well. So it'll really transform that space. The other one that we're working on and very supportive of is the work that the Public Museum is doing. So they'll get a couple $1 million of the $55 million to move forward with their river edge work. They're gonna create a space at the carousel where the carousel can be open if the museum is not. So the hope is that the carousel will be able to be open into the evenings till like 10 o'clock at night, and the museum can close, so they'll close that off. And it'll be a walkway between the building and the carousel. And then all along the river's edge, there's going to be about a $9 million investment to make that similar. It'll be more closely aligned with Annapolis Park, where you can actually get down to the river's edge. And we're still going to meet flood wall requirements by FEMA, I assure you. But we're not going to do it with a big flood wall. We're going to do it with more natural berming. So the edge will be more of a natural berming feature that still meets flood wall requirements. So that's really exciting, and we're super excited about that. Here's the other one that is taking up a ton of my time and is really exciting. We've talked about this in the city for about 10 years, I think, but we are so close to moving forward with getting an outside amphitheater. So the space that the city owns, 201 Market, if some of you remember, my predecessor tried to have that developed. It was called the Mystery Project way back in 2015. Kind of fell apart, was a total debacle. Right now, the city has about 18 acres of land where we park trucks right in the heart of our city on the river's edge. Not the highest and best use of that land. So we purchased Scribner, the old County Road Commission site. The city will be moving off of 201 Market over to Scribner, which will then allow us to sell 11 acres of this land to the Convention Arena Authority, where we will then build a 12,000 seat outside amphitheater right on our river's edge. And we are hoping to be in the ground with construction starting of May of 2024. So a year from right now, we should be breaking ground in the amphitheater. On the corner, Fulton and Market, that's a private development. I anticipate that will also move forward yet this year, but it's not being managed by the CAA. And here's some other work that we're doing. This is the Leonard to Ann. This is why it's so expensive and complicated, is because you have to go underneath the bridges. But we're doing a lot of work and investing on the river's edge. And then last but not least, the River Restoration Project. This is also taking up a lot of my time. So we have been working with a nonprofit in town, Grand Rapids Whitewater, for about 12 years with this vision to remove the 5 dams and restore our rapids to the natural state. And last year, we really thought we were close to getting a permit. We submitted a permit and went through the entire public hearing process, gave lots of feedback, answered lots of questions, really thought we were going to get an approval. And then in December, the EPA filed a formal objection to the design, saying that the design was in violation of Clean Water Act, and they felt that the velocity and scope of the waves were too dangerous. So then Eagle, with the EPA objection, said, we really cannot permit this design. And however, if you withdraw this design, you can either, if you keep moving forward with this design, we will deny it. And then the city would be at a cross. The city is technically the permitting agency. And this is just for the lower reach, the 4 lower head dams. But we need to get the lower head dams done so that we can remove the 6th Street dam. And we need to build a hydraulic structure further upstream. We're doing that with Army Corps. They're eager to get moving on it, but we got to do the lower reach first. So Eagle said, if you withdraw the permit, we'll work with you to submit a modified design. It will still have waves. They're just not going to be, as big of waves as you had hoped, but it will still be recreational and transformational. So we withdrew the permit in March. We are working with Eagle and EPA right now on a modified design. My hope is that we have a modified design submitted by the end of July, and then I have been assured by the governor's office that Eagle will make this a top priority to get the permit reviewed and moved as quickly as possible, as quickly as any regulatory agency can do that. But I do have a lot of faith in the governor. She's been very supportive of this project. The state has been supportive with funding, as well as just constantly nudging Eagle to make this a top priority. Again, COVID just threw a wrench in everything. We thought we'd be further along. Obviously, COVID and the global pandemic took precedent at the state level, and a lot of the work we were doing just kind of slowed down quite a bit. But I'm still hopeful. I actually am very optimistic that we could be in the water next year, at least for the removal of the 4 lower head dams. And then, as I said, then we'll start working on the upper reach. I co-chair a committee with Secretary Lamb from Great Lakes Fisheries, and all we're focused on is the upper reach. So one thing, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds because I could talk about this project all day. One thing we learned in doing all of the environmental studies is that the 6th Street Dam acts as a de facto lamprey barrier. Lamprey is a very invasive species. It kills fish and can truly just be devastating to our fish population. So that's why we're working with Fish and Wildlife as well as the Army Corps. Further up by Ann, we will build a hydraulic structure that will be able to be used to prevent lamprey from swimming upstream. and then we'll remove the 6th Street Dam. So that's ultimately still the vision. The vast majority of the rapids are actually up closer to the 6th Street Dam. There's a lot of beautiful natural bedrock that still exists up there. But I do believe that we're going to continue and we're going to get there. It's just going to take a little longer than we had hoped, which tends to be the story of my life sometimes. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Mill.
Oh, can you wait for the microphone?
Sorry.
Some years ago, the city had a real problem with underfunded pensions. That
yeah.
was a rather major issue, and some shifting from a pension plan to 401k.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as exciting as the river project, but could you give us a little update?
Yes, it's just as important. So we did a couple things. So Milt is right. About 12 years ago, we were in a really difficult position when it comes to both retirement, healthcare. We had a defined benefit retiree healthcare system, which was underfunded, our OPEB benefits. And then we had our general pension and police and fire pension. And we were underwater. So we did a couple things at the city through a lot of hard work and negotiation with our unions. We closed our defined benefit retiree healthcare system. So that's completely closed. We're funding it every single year. And so you know how this works, right? You have a tipping. We're already on the kind of other end of the bell curve with our retiree healthcare. And we moved to a defined contribution HRSA. So we put an amount of money in people's account every single year, and hopefully it accumulates so that when they retire, they have a good amount of money to get them through for their healthcare benefits. For for pension, we closed the general pension system. Same thing, it's a bell curve. We're on the tail end of that. I think we'll have it completely done. I think the last number I saw was maybe 18 years. And we moved to basically a 401k system. So our general retirement, I believe we're 87% funded in that, but that is starting to taper off. So our contributions to the general pension that we closed is coming down. For the police and fire, they stayed as a defined benefit. And we are, I should know this because we just saw the actuarial. I think we're about 82% funded. So we're in a pretty good shape with the police and fire. And then there's legislation at the state level. They likely are going to put a pot of money aside that will help cities that are both 60% and underfunded, and then those that are above 60% to help offset the cost of the annual contribution to get it closer to 100% funded. So we're in much better shape than we used to be with our legacy costs. Yeah, it's been a lot of hard work. And I should say, we have 15% of our budget, annual budget, in a budget stabilization fund. So during the recession, 14 years ago, we had almost zero in our savings. Now we have over 60 million. So, yeah.
So you mentioned that the average age of the population in Grand Rapids is 31.5. That I don't know how that compares to other cities, but that sounds very healthy to me.
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat the question? Yeah. So she asked about the average age of, go ahead.
Let's try again.
There
Is
you
that
go.
better? Thank you. You mentioned that the average age of a citizen in Grand Rapids is 31.5, or a resident of Grand Rapids is 31.5, which seems to me to be very healthy. But with that comes the needs of young families. And in order to stay healthy, we need to provide an infrastructure to meet those needs. I'm specifically thinking of childcare, although there are lots of needs, and I wonder if you could comment on what the city's doing to make this a healthy and welcoming environment to young families.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the city, we don't technically fund childcare. That's not one of our core services, although we support a lot of efforts through incentives and other tax breaks to support child care centers. So right now, Amplify, which is a development over on the southeast side, they are going to have a child care center. They're doing it in partnership with ELNC. So we recognize the need for that. So a couple things about the population. It is very healthy comparatively to other communities. You want to make sure that you're continuing to attract young talent who want to stay here, and we've been successful at doing that, at least over the last 10 years. The interesting thing about the data, though, is that more and more people are choosing not to have children. So the number of children being born actually isn't accelerating at the same rate. And so even in our school system, K through 12, you're not seeing a significant growth in student population, which has its downfalls as well, right? So we know that both are really important. I would say on the childcare side, it's a huge issue right now for companies that are trying to fill open positions. Childcare continues to be a major barrier. So there's a coalition in Grand Rapids that has been working on that, trying to get state support for childcare. Childcare is very expensive, largely because of some of the state regulations and licensing requirements. And so they have been actively working at the state level to try to get the state to be more supportive to help good quality childcare centers open up. It's an issue. I could not agree more.
Is the mayor position still part-time?
It is part-time. I know, I probably should have said that at the beginning.
When I listened to this list of that Pam read, I thought, I think she's part-time.
I am technically part-time. On paper, it's part-time. But I can tell you it takes all of my time. So I have been teaching at Grand Valley. Actually been teaching at Grand Valley since being mayor. But I just finished up teaching. Actually, the end of this month, my contract will be done. And I decided that I'm not going to work a second job, at least for the next year, so that I can get some of these things done before I'm done being mayor. And also just have a little bit more sleep. I don't know. I kind of want to. I'm really prioritizing this next year to try to get things over the finish line.
So is that realistic for the future? I mean, you have all these experience and skills you bring to it, but what does the city do for the next mayor?
Well, whoever the next mayor is, I will do everything I can to support them to be successful if they'll take my help. So not every mayor is interested in getting support from the prior mayor. But I have loved having the support of Mayor Hartwell, especially early in my tenure. I called him, we had lunch, he was my confidant, I'd vent to him. But the interesting thing is that being a young female is a very different experience than being, someone, George had been in the community, was so well known. His 12th year as mayor was very different than my first year as mayor. So he could listen, but he couldn't always relate. So.
According to, in housing, are you anticipating an influx in our immigrants coming from the South? And what are you anticipating as far as housing for them?
Yeah, so I was just yesterday in a task force meeting around new Americans and refugees. Samaritas and Bethany Christian Services are two primary nonprofits in town that have been working to help support immigrants and refugees. As of right now, we think we have the capacity to support any individuals that come here. So we'll get continued updates. We are part, though, of a larger county-wide initiative called How Do We Become a Welcoming Community, and a welcoming plan, and we have a welcoming plan together with the county. So the county's much more active in that space than they have been in the past, and they are also looking at what can they do to be supportive. We have a full-time person at the county who works on this every single day.
Two questions, if I might. First of all, back on the major projects, there's been a lot of talk about a soccer stadium, some talk about it being near the Gerald Ford. Is this a solid project, or is it just talk at this point?
Ooh, solid or talk? I would say, so there is talk in our community about a soccer stadium on the west side. And I would say it's more than talk, but it's not yet solid. How's that?
Active?
Very, very, very active.
Good.
Yes.
And then secondly, I think we all think in terms of Grand Rapids in the sense of greater Grand Rapids. And yet I think a much smaller portion is actually physically Grand Rapids. So I'm curious, what percent does Grand Rapids make of Grand Rapids?
Yeah.
And what does that mean to you when it comes to doing all these projects when really a lot of them are beyond the city limits?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So City of Grand Rapids, we are a 44 square mile city. Our population is just over 200,000. We're surrounded by other cities. We actually call ourselves the Metro 6. We meet every single month. So I meet with, there's East Grand Rapids, Kentwood, Wyoming, Walker, Granville. And us mayors, first off, we all serve on the Rapid Board because that's a multi-jurisdictional body. But then we meet every single month with our city managers. So it's the mayors and the managers, and we meet every month, and we talk about ways that we collaborate together. The county is about 600, I think last I saw, like 660,000. So the city is still a significant part of the overall county, especially as you go beyond the cities. It gets very rural and less populated. We work very closely with the county. So I've been working with the county on issues around childhood lead poisoning, on the Coalition on Homelessness and issues around homelessness, especially on how do we get individuals who are unsheltered into rapid rehousing. I've been working with the county around this big, huge, sustainable business park that they're talking about building out in Allegan, really rethinking how what we do with trash, and how do we make more of our waste go into the recycled system or use it instead of putting it in a landfill. We've also been working with the county. I didn't speak out this, but I should have. We've been working really closely with them with Network 180. So the police department in July, so a little less than a year ago, we started a mental health co-response team. So we team up some of our police officers with clinicians. And when a call comes into 911 where we think it's an individual who's experiencing a mental health crisis, the team goes out together. The challenge has been is that sometimes we don't have anywhere to take them other than emergency room or jail. So we're in the process of working with the county and our healthcare systems to open up an 18-bed crisis stabilization unit, and the county has been leading the charge on that through Network 180. So I'd say I personally work really closely with them, but so they work across our departments as well. Yeah. Collaboration, I always say this when I'm in other cities or with other mayors, we really are a city that is committed to collaboration. I think it's in our DNA, quite frankly. You don't find that always in other cities. Yeah.
Just if you're retiring from Grand Valley, I don't know if you recognize that one of your benefits is a year free membership in Grand Forum. So
Yes!
I would just like to welcome you to our
Thank you.
group from that standpoint. But now
Thank
my question is, well, I'll leave the complaint about our street being full of potholes.
What street do you live on?
I assume you're
What? Crescent?
Crescent. See,
Okay, all right. All right.
Anyway, it's really hard to ride my bike down that street without dodging the potholes. But at any rate, the question I had was about the homeless outreach team. Are they just getting people off the street that are sleeping under US 131 with? You can't even cover up with a newspaper anymore because the digital newspaper doesn't keep you warm. Or is there a level beyond that to get them situated somewhere in housing?
That is a great question, and it's actually one of my concerns and complaints about our homeless outreach team, is that they're more focused on checking on people to make sure they're okay, and less they try to connect them with services, but they are not currently working closely with an individual housing provider that can do that. So we're in the process right now of trying to change that. The other thing about, and I could talk about homelessness for quite some time. So in our community, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that in some way or another serve individuals experiencing homelessness. Those agencies aren't always very well aligned, and they're not always focused on outcomes. And so They provide really good data about how many meals they're providing and how many contacts they're having and how many showers they're providing. But the ultimate goal is that these individuals are being housed as quickly as possible, and that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So when somebody is housed, we need to make sure that they have the supports in place to stay in that housing. It's really hard for people to get stabilized if they have a serious mental health issue or a substance use issue if they don't have a roof over their head. And so at the city, we historically in our community, the city and the county, quite frankly, has really allowed the community and the agencies through a structure called the COC kind of lead the effort around homelessness. We've been a supporter with funding and other things, but we really haven't stepped in as a leader. And what has become apparent, especially since COVID, is that we need to get much more active on what our expectations are for the amount of money we're spending in this space. City spends millions and millions of dollars to support the system, which is one of the reasons that years ago I co-chaired a group called Housing Stability Alliance. Out of that came a nonprofit called Housing Kent. The intent of that is to create a backbone with really good data that is shared transparently to all of us, to the entire community, to shed some light on what's working and what's not working. And that's about a year into getting off the ground, not quite where we want it to be just yet. The other thing is that we need better shared data all around in the system. We need to know, who the individuals are, what services that they're connecting with, what are the outcomes of those services. And I believe we can do a much better job at doing that. So our point in time count data, it hasn't grown significantly over the last decade. It's still, I think, last January, it was a little over 800 people experiencing homelessness or using shelter or transitional housing, and about 52 of them were unsheltered, living outside. I think we're a city that can find housing for 52 people who are unsheltered. And then really look at how much money we're paying into the entire system and being more intentional with aligning how we use those dollars to get those individuals stable housing. It's a heavy lift. It's a big system, and it's really going to take a lot of people coming to the table, willing to do something a little bit different or to try new things, and to look at. There's great best practices out there when it comes to responding more effectively to individuals experiencing homelessness. We just don't have alignment with all of the different agencies doing the work. Yeah.
And I have an online question from Loretta. She is wondering, what relationship does the city have in working with the school district as you increase housing?
Yeah, so the school district, Grand Rapids Public Schools, is an independent organization with their own elected body. We partner with them, I would say, but ultimately I don't have any authority over their decision making. I don't have any authority or power over what they decide to do with their buildings or curriculum or public safety department, but we do partner together. So there's it's called City School Liaison. It's a committee that I serve on, and the president of the school board serves on. 2 commissioners join me, and then the superintendent and the city manager, and we get together and we are always looking at ways that we can partner. We partner largely around some of our youth initiatives, some of that connecting children to nature. We partner with that. We partner with playgrounds and programming, youth programming in some of the green spaces. I have a mayor's youth council of about 44 high school students that I meet with every month. And we do that in partnership with the school. But ultimately, they're independent bodies. Yeah.
So, Mayor, thank you for everything you've done. And as Jan said, it's only part-time, but in your next year and a half, just keep working hard because there are great goals.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what you think the reaction of Grand Rapids might be now that legislation has come forward about a land bank again.
Oh, yes.
And that Kristen Grant just put into the works. And I know we got rid of it before, so I'm just wondering how you think that's going to impact or could impact the housing situation.
Yeah, thank you. So, oh my goodness, thank you for asking that question. And then make sure I come back to bike lanes real quick and trees. So Years ago, the Kent County had a land bank, and we worked really closely with the land bank and we did a lot of great stuff, right? We were able to secure houses for Well House for them to expand their program. We were able to identify locations to build affordable housing. Kent County Land Bank went away. We've been working with the Michigan Land Bank, and basically what the land bank enables us to do is to acquire we can do a whole host of things, but largely what we've done is we've looked at properties that are in foreclosure, and we have at the city we have first right of refusal for public purpose. And historically, when we had a Kent County Land Bank, we would take a lot of those properties and with the goal of having them developed into affordable housing. A land bank can clear title, they can use a TIF, they can capture a portion of the property taxes to help offset the cost of that development, whatever it is. And it can be used both for residential, and it can also be used for commercial, it can be used for industrial. So when we had a Kent County Land Bank, we actually went around the city and I identified some vacant, blighted old gas stations. And we used the land bank to acquire those properties, clear title, clean up the site, and then have them redeveloped. One of them is, which was one of the projects I was really proud of when I was on the land bank, is Ace Hardware right here on Fulton. So we were able to help with the development of the hardware store when we had the Kent County Land Bank. And we have lots of success stories. Michigan Land Bank has been great. You know, we'll use some of the tools, but it's not the same as having somebody on the ground right here working and saying, okay, that's a dilapidated site, or that's a blighted site, or that's a contaminated site, and we need to identify what tools we have to clean that up. So my hope is that, one, the legislation passed the House, it'll be up in the Senate. We're working hard to make sure it gets to the governor's office. It'll allow the city of Grand Rapids to create our own land bank. Right now in the state of Michigan, the city of Detroit is the only city that has enabling legislation to allow them to create a land bank. I think Grand Rapids should have the same opportunity if we want. And so hopefully once that's passed, we'll look at what are the core tools within the land bank that we think we can use. I'd like to use it primarily to help with home ownership. So you can offset the cost through a land bank with the tax capture to pay for some of that affordability. So that's my hope. If that's coupled with the TIF, with the housing TIF, I think we can make it work. And so that's one of my hopes. But we'll get a team of really smart people together to come up with how we can best use that tool. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I should say to you about bike lanes, though, because bike lanes has been another priority of mine. When I first got elected as a city commissioner, so that was almost 18 years ago, in the city of Grand Rapids, we had less than 3 miles of bike lanes. Today, we have 121 miles of bike lanes. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done to try to create safer spaces. Is it perfect? No, we have a lot of work to do, but it's a whole lot safer for cyclists today than it was 15 years ago. So that's exciting. Yeah.
And we have time for about one more question.
All right. Oh.
Just curious about the 40% tree canopy and how that's going. Just wanted to know about that.
Yeah, so we still have a ways to go. Thank you for asking, because that's something I work on. So when I became mayor, I started a Mayor's Greening Initiative, raised private dollars to plant hundreds of trees every single year. That coupled, so what was my last number that I had? Since through my Greening Initiative, I think we're up to over 4,000 trees. And we also did a whole complete streets rewrite, updated our tree ordinance. So now with all of our street projects, we're also planting a significant number of trees. And then we're looking at parts of our city where we are deplete trees and green space. Some parts of our city have 45, 50% tree canopy. Downtown, we are at 8%. I can tell you we were at like 3% before I became mayor, and our goal is 10% just because there's so much concrete, right? So what we've tried to do is, instead of just having a blanket 40% tree canopy citywide, we're looking district by district. So what is a realistic tree canopy for downtown? We think 10% is realistic. And we think we can get there. By the spring of next year, we will have gotten to hopefully 11% tree canopy downtown. So we've taken a more of a narrow approach at neighborhoods, looking at, where do we really need to add trees. So I'll have to get the latest number. We had to take down some maple trees last year that were at the end of their life. So part of it is how do we, as trees die, how do we replace them? But then also how do we add? In our parks, we've reached a pretty high tree canopy in almost all of our parks. That was low-hanging fruit. Once we get to all the trees in the right-of-way and park spaces, what we really need to do is focus on adding trees to private property. That's a little bit harder. So we've started to think through, like, how do we incent that? What does that look like? Can we do something more proactive to go and encourage people to plant trees on private property, especially sometimes with consumers going through and butchering our trees in the right-of-way, which drives me crazy. I just had a meeting with consumers a couple days ago and was not very happy with them. So it's an ongoing effort. Will we get to 40% while I'm mayor? Probably not, unfortunately. But hopefully the next mayor will keep it a priority.
This isn't a question, it's a hope.
Okay.
Clearly, you've been a great leader for the city of Grand Rapids.
Thank you.
And clearly you set goals and you meet them and you hold yourself accountable and, to my knowledge, scandal-free. And
I have a year and a half. Give me time.
Yeah, you do, right, okay. But my question is, it's not a question, it's a hope. Are you thinking about a future still in government to help, like, perhaps lead the state in some area where we can continue to have, great responsible leadership?
Thank you for that. Thank you for the nice feedback. I tend to be task-oriented. I spoke yesterday at an emerging leaders group, and one of the guys in the group asked me what my DISC profile was. I'm like, it's been so long I can't remember, but I know I'm task-oriented. So here's a couple of things about how I live my life. I rarely plan that far ahead. So I have a deep faith, a strong faith, and I trust my intuition. Opportunities come up, and quite frankly, I never thought I would run for public office. When I graduated from college, this was not even on my radar. It happened truly organically. I didn't even come up with the idea. I actually had people encourage me to run. And then as I really explored the opportunity, I'm like, I think this is the right thing. I think this is where I'm meant to be. So I really do believe that. Like, I'm where I'm meant to be in this season of my life. I'm not sure where that is after this season. It could be in public office. I can tell you I won't run against somebody that I believe in, that I think is doing a good job. I'd much rather support people, especially the next generation, help them be the leader that they can be. So I'm not quite sure. But I think by this time next year, I'll have a better sense of knowing where I'm supposed to be next. It could be in government. It could be somewhere in the community. I can tell you it will still be giving back in some way. I don't see myself going back into social work. I don't see myself leading a nonprofit again. So it'll be something more community focused, maybe policy level at the state level. But we'll just kind of see where things are about a year from now. Next year is going to be a really crazy election season, both locally and obviously at the state level and then nationally. And so we'll kind of see what happens based on that. Yeah, but thank you. Thanks. All right. Anything else? Good? All right, you're welcome. Thank you.